This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net. Welcome to a collaborative podcast series brought to you by NewClevelandRadio.net and Cleveland 13 News. I'm your host, Karen Hale, and I'm honored to share space with extraordinary individuals from Cleveland and beyond who've discovered their purpose and the power to live it out fully while lifting others along the way. Over the past 13 years, podcasting has been more than a career. It's been a path to reclaiming my own authenticity. Before that first recording, I spent years chasing an image of who I thought I should be. But the moment I introduced my first guest, something shifted. I found my voice, and more importantly, my purpose. This series is about meaningful connections, mutual growth, and the beauty of learning from each other's stories. I'm so glad you're here. So let's meet today's guest. Now, I have to admit, I'm a little intimidated interviewing Matt Greminger, only because I've known Matt through social media for the most part, probably for the last 13 years since I started.
Probably.
And every time I see something from Matt, it's like, wow, look what he's doing. And almost get a little jealous that you thought of that idea before I did. But the best part is when I saw you putting together Cleveland 13 News, I knew I needed to be part of it. And it took me a while to contact you. But I'm so glad that I'm here. I'm so glad I'm interviewing you and sharing your journey with not only the people who tune into Cleveland 13 News, but who are going to tune in because of your story. So welcome.
Thank you. And I'm thrilled to be a part of this. I love it so much. So I couldn't be happier to be here.
Good. So you've been on a journey, and I know there are other businesses that you've started, have been successful at, but there's something special about this journey. So
There it is.
when did you decide that I have an idea and I'm going to run with it?
So I've always been fascinated with the news. Always. The very first time I was ever on the news in a news story, it was with 19. And I met with Sharon Reed at the time. She was an anchor. But the reporter who came out and met me at my house was Denise Zarrella. And she has since left 19 and a few years later joined Cleveland 13 after we talked about many, many things, why I love doing it, why she loved doing it, what she missed about it, and what she really wanted to do moving forward. But I was always fascinated by it. It's such a weird medium. It's intimidating. It's fantastic. It's scary. It's amazing. And one thing it always is unforgettable when you're a part of it. So a few years ago, when my grandmother, who was, let's call her the matriarch of the family because she really was, she passed away. And I was sitting in a group of friends, and there was a really big Mega Millions or Powerball thing happening. And we all bought tickets, and we were sitting around the fire talking about what we would do if we won. And they're talking about I'd live on a beach and I'd spend my life drinking margaritas and pina coladas, and one person's like, I'd buy a boat and I'd live on the water. Another one's like, I'd move to California and just enjoy. And I couldn't find joy in any of those ideas. I love the idea of taking time and spending it on the beach, or taking time and spending it in not necessarily California. It's not really, it's a little too, uh, uh, the air is a little bit too thick. It's way too hot for me there. It doesn't rain. But I like the idea of spending a little bit of time doing those things, but I could never sustain that. I would get bored. So I sort of sat back and thought to myself, what would I do? Could I do for the rest of my life and never get bored with it? Because that's happened to me with other businesses. I started a photography company that was huge, and I had thousands of photographers all across the country. I had a legal support company, and I had tens of thousands of people working for my company, and it got boring. I was good at it, but it got boring. And so I knew that two things. Number one, my passion is in creation. I love creating things and building it and watching it grow more probably than a side effect of being outside. But it's so nice out here. More than, really running things on a day-to-day basis. But what could I run on a day-to-day basis that would just thrill me and I'd be excited every day to get up? And for me, I realized I can combine the two: building, growing, creating, with my other major passion, which is learning about uh, amazing and extraordinary things and sharing that with the world in a way that hasn't been shared yet. So that led me to create a YouTube series called Cleave It to Us. And that was around for an entire year before Cleveland 13. And this was my way of sort of taking the best elements of the news, things that I love the most, which were, kicking it with Kenny does it a lot. He gets in there and he gets his hands dirty and he gets very hands-on and behind the scenes. And I thought I would love to do that, but I would like to take it even further. I want to be involved in anything, even if I'm taking out the trash, because that's where you get the best, that's where you have the best conversations. So I started I started Cleave It to Us December 3rd, and this was 3 years ago. And it was on the anniversary of my grandmother passing. And immediately it took off. It was phenomenal. The feedback I got, the people involved, everyone was having a great time. And I was having the time of my life. And I loved it, and I still love it. But then people would reach out because I had reach. I had I had the ability to tell a story, and it got out to a lot of people. And so people would reach out to me and they would say, this is a story we'd love you to cover. And a lot of times it was a story that needed to be told, but it didn't align with what Cleave It to Us was. Cleave It to Us was about fun. It was about exploring. And I have a mother who lost her daughter to suicide that reached out and said her story needs to be told. And I couldn't agree more. And I sent her information for all of these people that she could potentially go through to get her story out, and nobody did. And it bothered me, and it sort of stuck with me. I did end up publishing an article, but I kind of felt weird doing it, not because I didn't want to share the story. I really did want to share the story. I just felt like my platform wasn't the right one for it. And this happens so often. So fast forward a bit, we're talking about around the time when the protests and the riots and the unrest in Minneapolis over George Floyd. My office is sort of like a bat cave. I've got 13 screens, and so they're all over the place, and I've got data coming from everywhere. And these protests are happening in Minneapolis, and I've got two screens on this side and two screens on this side. You might have heard me tell this story before because it's important, because this was transformative for me. on these two screens, I had a Fox broadcast and a CNN broadcast of what was going on in Minneapolis. On these two screens, up and down, I had one was a Facebook Live from someone who was there, and another was a TikTok Live from someone else who was there. And I was just absorbing. I was taking in as much information as I could. And then something happened. I saw something happen on a live stream, which was not biased. It was completely third party. I was a fly on the walls. It was as if I saw it with my own eyes. And then 10, 15 minutes later, CNN's reporting about what I just saw happen 10, 15 minutes ago, and they didn't report it accurately. And I know that because I saw what happened. And then I saw Fox report the same thing, different story compared to CNN, but also not what happened. And it bothered me so much. And that in that moment, I said, you know what? There needs to be a change. There needs to be, accountability is a strong word today because we don't see very much of it. But there needs to be trust. We have to know that we can trust the media. And right now, we can't. We can't. The fact of the matter is there's very few trusted, reliable sources. And even those sources publish a lot of op-eds, which I love. Don't get me wrong. But I need things that can be verified, things that make myself a fly on the wall so I don't have to ask any questions after I hear the story or read the story or watch the story. I don't have any questions. So I decided maybe we reinvent the model. I started doing some research and I started really diving into what really makes a good newsroom. And I spoke to friends that I had in the media for years and years and years, my friends like Denise Zarrella. I got to talk with Robin Swoboda after my best friend passed away year after my grandmother did. And it was a lot of death for me. But, you know, these things open up conversations, which you might not want to have at the time, but sometimes they're transformative. And I talked to a lot of people and I learned everything I could about how a newsroom operates. And just like almost any other business I started, and Cleveland 13 isn't a business, but it's like any other venture I started. I did it because I learned everything I could about an industry and I saw where there were gaps. I saw where there was room for improvement. I really saw that in the news. So I started experimenting and I played around with some ideas and I started talking to people and getting them on board and created a group of advisors that were not just in the news, but they were in the news. They were business leaders. They were nonprofit directors. They were soccer moms. You know, I wanted every demographic represented so that we've got a think tank that's not just one-sided. I wanted people from every political affiliation, for everything. And I pulled this group of extraordinary people together and built up this incredible launch. And it helped. Cleave It to Us helped a lot because by that time I had already met so many new people, and my network has always been insanely massive. I can't go anywhere without running into somebody I know. But it just exploded with Cleave It to Us, and that helped because when we launched Cleveland 13, we did the 13 days of giveaways. And everyone that we featured in Cleave It to Us was like, how can we be a part of this? And so that immediately got attention going, and it allowed us to grow from the onset. And that's what we've done. from the launch of Cleveland 13 to right now, we have grown. We have grown, 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 and it just keeps getting bigger and better. And in a nutshell, I tend to get very long-winded.
It's okay. You're doing great.
But in a nutshell, that's sort of how it came about. This is something that I can do and will do, um, as long as I possibly can, because I'm never going to get sick of it. I'm never going to get sick of it. I don't have the same four walls to look at every day. I'm doing a different story, and it's always something different. And I get to be a reporter and run a news network. Yeah, you don't see the president of any other news network out there reporting.
No, they're sitting in their ivory tower.
They're sitting in their ivory towers, and I get it. I get the appeal. But it's way more fun on the ground. It's way more fun behind the scenes. And every day meeting new people and hearing new stories, and you get to be the one to tell their story, and you get to be the one to give them a voice so they can tell their story, and you get to be the one to put that out there. And you get to be the one to come up with the strategy to do it. That's so fun. And it's challenging in the best ways. And I think that the team that we've built, whether it's people on the advisory board or affiliate contributors, reporters, I think they're all really, regardless of their financial situation or their political affiliations or their reporting style, they all have that in common. They're doing this because of passion. None of us get paid. I don't get paid for what I do. You don't get paid for
Nope.
for talking to me right now. It's the ad space that we sell on the website. While it's very important, it's to keep the overhead costs of the stuff running. I don't get any of that. And it's okay to me. It was always okay to me if Cleveland 13 operated at a loss. As long as I could afford that loss, it was okay, because even if nobody watched it, it meant something to me. And the flip, well, what happened is a lot of people love it,
Yeah.
and it still means something to me. So it still means everything to me. So it's exceeded my wildest dreams, and it just keeps getting better and better and better. And this year alone has been filled with change and growth, and to an extent I never would have imagined. Now, what does next year have in store? What does this holiday season have in store? I'm excited about it. And I try my best to stay in that mentality, because everyone has things going on in their life. Everyone has heartache and heartbreak and struggle, and sometimes we worry about money, and sometimes we worry about our health, and it brings us down. At the end of the day, the most powerful thing we have is our mind and our ability to create our own destiny. And that's what I try to do every moment that I can. Because the one thing you never get back, you can get back money, you can get back your health, you can't get back your time. And, people say, well, life's short. It is. It is. Granted, it's the longest thing you do, but but comparatively, it's short. Every time I have a birthday, I'm not excited about birthdays anymore. It reminds me I'm 1 year closer to death. But at the same time, I could walk across the street and get hit by a bus. Or I could live to be into my 120s and die peacefully in my sleep. I don't want for that moment to come and I have any regrets. I want to know that I am thoroughly, thoroughly used up. That I didn't just exist in this world. I lived this life.
Your journey, although different than mine, has taken a very similar path. When I started podcasting 13 years ago, I had been pushed out of corporate America, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, except I knew who I had wanted to be for a very long time. And I wanted to be a broadcaster. And I heard this thing that you can do a podcast. I had no idea what it meant, but I looked into it and I told my husband I needed a soundboard, I needed microphones. I mean, I went all out. Didn't need to, obviously, but I've been doing it for basically the same reason you do it. When I hear somebody else's story and I can share that, number one, it makes me feel much better. I'm helping somebody, but you know what? Their story is helping me.
Yes, it's a
And
mutual thing.
and if I can be a better person today because of something that I'm doing, I want to do that. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong to work in corporate America. I'm not saying it's wrong to get a paycheck because we all need money to survive. But what I see in Cleveland 13 is that we all have a passion and we all want to let other people develop their passions.
Yes.
And I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, it wasn't about passion. It was about you have to learn this so you can do this and you can live this life. And
It was very, even now, still, the education system is very robotic. We're teaching so that students can pass tests. We're not teaching so that they understand. I'll be honest, when I graduated high school, anything I knew about trigonometry went out the window before I left the building. And I had advanced scores in math. I don't remember any of it because it wasn't necessary to the life I was supposed to have. And perspective, sorry, I'm going to say it, not spray it. Perspective is everything. Perspective is everything. And words, and that's another reason I love this so much, and I'm sure you share this with me. Words are some of my favorite things because they can do incredible damage, but they can also do incredible good. They can heal, they can hurt, they can build, they can destroy. And it's all about how you use them. And so I'm surrounded by nature right now. Everything's flying around me. Um, and so that's really what it boils down to. Corporate America is the exact right job for some people. And sometimes I wish that I was destined for a much more simple life because ignorance truly, truly is bliss. And the older you get, the more you understand that. Ignorance is truly bliss. Knowledge is a burden, but you can't change that. What you can change is your perspective. And so I'll give you a quick example. Fabulous story that's 100% true. In over 100 years ago, 113 years ago, my great great grandparents bought tickets to they lived in America, but they weren't in America, and they bought tickets to come home on what was then called the largest ship in the world, unsinkable. And the night before, they loaded up all their stuff. They weren't very well off, but they had enough to be able to buy these tickets third class. So there was no bringing your servants to load your stuff up the day of. They came the night before. Their stuff was loaded up, and then it was easier for the majority of the ship, which was third class anyways, to get in unnoticed. They just go right in. And I don't know exactly what caused it. I don't know if they overslept, if traffic was an issue, but they missed it. All of their stuff ended up on the Titanic, but they did not. And I think about that way more often than I probably should, but it's important because I know, and I never knew them. They were great greats, you know. But I have to imagine that when that happened, they were thinking, this is the worst day of our lives. Nothing could be worse than this. We blew all of our money on this ticket to get us back home, and we missed it. and we can't afford to get, that was the worst thing that had ever happened to them. And then I imagine how they felt a week later, 2 weeks later, when the news came out that it sank. And I don't know if it was a third, 2/3 of the passengers died, and most of them were third class. Perspective is a lot, and you can't control what you can't control. And sometimes I'm a hypocrite and I get upset about things that I can't control. But we all are. We're human. We're imperfect, and I'm the first to admit I am imperfect. Because perfection isn't really a thing.
Right.
Perfection is a mindset. And so the happiest people are happy because of their mindset, not because of their bank account. Is it easy to get to that place if you have more money? Maybe, because you can throw money at problems and things that inconvenience you. But it doesn't fix anything. It doesn't fix most things. The ability, it fixes your ability to change the weather. It's snowing here. I'm going to go somewhere warm. I can change the weather. I can change how comfortable I am, maybe, but it doesn't fix relationships, and it doesn't fix your passion. And you can be passionate about something that makes you no money, or passionate about something that makes you all the money in the world. But if you're making all the money in the world and don't have the passion, you're not happy.
Exactly. Exactly. And sadly, it takes some of us a very long time before we realize that. Um, I have two sons. My youngest son was born on the autism spectrum. People who know him question it, like, really? Like, look what he's done in life. But we were told at the age of 6, don't have any expectations. This kid is not going anywhere. And we followed his passions. He loved music. And from the age of 2, he loved sports. And my husband is not a sports guy, but he learned how to support our son with sports. And it hasn't been easy. And there have been times that we scratched our head and said, why are we doing this? Why don't we
Yeah.
just listen to the doctors and say, okay, he's going to turn out to be nothing? Well, as it turns out, next week, he starts working for the Ohio State University as their retail sports manager.
Kudos to him
But
and to you.
but you don't know that you're doing the right thing when you're doing the right thing. And I'm hoping people will understand that. You do what you think is right at the moment. And you have that opportunity to look back and say, what could I have done differently?
Yeah. And
Or
and and
should I do
retrospect
something differently?
retrospect is the silent killer. It really, I struggle with this more than anything, and it makes me hypocritical, and I understand that, because I tell people all the time, don't look at things that have passed and have regrets, because you're just wasting your time. And like I said, time is something you don't get back. You're wasting your time on grief and anger and regret. That's just, it's so unnecessary to where you're going. It's, if anything, it's an inhibitor. And I do it all the time. But I'm getting better at it. I'm getting better at it, because um, anything bad that's happened in my life that I wish I could have done differently, because of the way it happened, something great came out of it, something that I would never change. And so those are the moments I try and focus on. Had I done things differently, I wouldn't have this. And this is something that I now know I could never live without. Um, and sometimes it's just, and not discounting your gut, not
Exactly.
discounting your gut, not discounting your ability to communicate and connect with the universe. This is everyone. We all have the ability. And to me, without getting too philosophical or religious even, um, that's what I view God to be. The interconnectedness of everything. That's God. That's the all-powerful, all-knowing, because it's all of us.
Yes.
And ironically, the Bible kind of supports that.
Yes.
No matter
Absolutely.
what Bible you're looking at, that God created man in his image. Well, because we all are a part of an interconnected system, which is God. God is the computer, but you know, it's and to me, knowing that if you're really, really lucky, if you're really, really lucky, you get 100 years out of this life. And if you're really lucky, um, and how many years do we spend worrying about things that are going to happen or stressing about things that we wish we could have done differently? All of that time, if you add it up, would be years and years and years of our life.
Absolutely.
I did a statistic experiment once when I was in college, and I did the math to find out how much of our lives, on average, an American spends waiting at red lights. And it was over a year. Over a year of our lives are spent, on average, waiting at a red light. And I want to spend the majority of my life on green. So that's where we're at, and that's what I try to do, and I try to encourage people. And you mentioned that learning people's stories and sharing people's stories does as much for you and me as it does for them. And I'll take it a step further. I love when I get to do this and then I hear somebody's story, and their story I feel like would resonate with somebody else who I met who they would never know. And then
Exactly.
I introduce them and they're friends forever. These are things that give me a high that no drug could ever touch. This is real. This is real. People tell me, they'll email me, and they'll tell me in person, which is my favorite, when we do an interview or we're done with an interview, that this is the best interview they've ever done or the most fun they've ever had doing an interview. And it makes me feel so good. Not because, I mean, I'm definitely proud of the work that I did, but because they saw themselves represented in the way that they wanted, that
Exactly.
they truly, truly, their story was told in a way that best reflected, better than any other time that they had done this, and that they had fun doing it. And that's why we threw out a lot of rules at Cleveland 13. I literally rewrote the rule book. I published the book on this that I'm hoping ends up in colleges so that they teach a new way to be involved in news reporting and journalism and broadcasting. And sometimes you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes you need to take flight.
Yes. Absolutely.
Sometimes the wheel doesn't need to be reinvented when we've got human flight. We need to take off. Sometimes you don't need to think outside the box. Sometimes you need to throw away the box. The box isn't an obstacle. So we threw away the box. The number one rule of broadcasting is don't lose control of the microphone. That's the first rule I threw out. And I'll tell you why. Denise Zarrella. First time I was ever on the news, there were big cameras and lights and a cameraman, and they were in my parents' house. And I was intimidated, and I was nervous and scared. I'd never done this before. And Denise is there with their 19 Action News microphone. It was so cool. And I'm like, oh my God, I see her on TV. She's right here. But I was so nervous, and I said, can I take a picture with the microphone, and can I hold the mic? And she goes, yeah. I didn't know that she was breaking the first rule of broadcasting, but she let me take a picture with the mic, and she let me hold it. And then uh, for the first half of that entire thing, I was holding the microphone, and I was in control. This wasn't a live thing. I was in control, and most of the anxiety and the nervousness just went away. And I thought, I've never seen that before. In fact, I've seen the opposite. I've especially with Wendy Williams, she was big on that. Never lose control of the microphone. And I thought the news doesn't need to be about control. And it also doesn't need to be about interviews.
Right.
I don't want anyone doing an interview with Cleveland 13. We don't do interviews, we do conversations. That's how you learn. And you learn more. This is why I think Cleave It to Us was so successful, is so successful. You learn more having a conversation than you ever will in an interview. I've learned more about a business while talking to the owner while I'm cooking something in their kitchen with them than I've learned just sitting down and talking to them. Because when you're doing something, oh, what's this? This is a cool tool. I've never seen anything like this. What does it do? And then that turns into something else. Well, I found this one time at a shop in India, and they never sold them in America. And now my mind is blown, and the story took on a whole new life. And I live for that. I live for that. So everyone, I've never been a jealous person. If somebody has more than I have or succeeds in excess of my success in the same industry, I don't get jealous. And I really don't really understand jealousy. I understand it's a thing. I just don't have it. But for me, what hits me the most is when people will reach out who are very business minded and they say, you did a story on this and now all the other networks are covering it. Doesn't that really piss you off? And no, I love it. I love it. I don't get jealous if they got coverage of something that we didn't. I don't get jealous if they only heard about something because we did. I'm thrilled for whoever it was that I covered that now they have more coverage. And it happened recently with Lost and Found in Cleveland. Were you there? Did you see that?
Yes, yes.
So Keith and Marissa, who created that movie, I reached out by accident. I didn't know this movie was a thing. I was looking up something on June Squibb. She was doing something, and I looked it up, and it said that there was an upcoming film she was in called Lost and Found in Cleveland. And I'm like, what is this? I start doing research. Nobody's talking about it. There's a premiere at Cleveland International Film Festival on this date, and it's a month and a half away, and nobody's talked about this. There's a trailer out there, and the trailer blew my mind. I'm like, this is so Cleveland. It looks amazing. So I reached out to Keith and Marissa and the editor and the cinematographer. I reached out to everyone. And they all reached back out and said, we'd love to do a story. So when I sat down with them, they said no other network has reached out. It's coming up. So we're a little nervous because this is the world premiere, basically. I mean, it had already premiered at a film festival elsewhere, but here in the place, people were going to watch the film largely in a room that it was filmed in. How cool is that? And nobody in Cleveland was talking about it. Yet they all had the opportunity. It was on the schedule for the film festival. So they're telling me this when we're talking. And after the camera stopped rolling, I said, I can't guarantee this, but what happens a lot is when we publish a story, 5's going to contact you, 3's going to contact you, maybe 8 and maybe Cleveland.com, but definitely 5. And most likely you'll get 8 and 3. And we published the story. It was a fabulous story, one of my favorites. And it did. It published. The next thing you know, IdeaStream is interviewing Marissa at her house. She moved to Cleveland after the film. Fox is doing a story, 3, 5, Cleveland.com is doing a story. And at the premiere, I got to see Keith and Marissa there. And Marissa came over to me and she said, nobody knew about this until the story that you did. And it was more than sold out. They let people in that were lined up that couldn't even get tickets. And it made me so, so, so happy. And I made friends, in the process. I've made friends with 85% of the people I've interviewed. But they weren't interviews. They were conversations.
And that's what interviews should be. They should be conversations such as if anybody, as you're listening to this between myself and Matt, I know who Matt is. I went out and I read some things about your past, but that's not what this conversation is about. It's about letting Matt tell us what's going on. And
Yeah, and for the record, since you looked into my past, I'm not actually a serial killer. That
you're
was a hoax.
not.
No, I wasn't. I
I'm so
wasn't.
glad to know that. I am.
No, they were all. That
But
was a big hoax,
there's
fake news.
I know there is something special going on because you you are the president of Cleveland 13 News, right?
Yes, I am
But
now again.
well, wait a second. I was going to say you took a back seat for a while,
I did.
but what's happening now?
So now is the big comeback. So many things have happened. I've got things going on personally that that involve my family, and I realized that it was taking time away from the administrative things that I was able to do. I was still able to do some news stories and stuff, but reporters were sending in stories that needed to go out and they weren't getting out on time, or they would go through our quality control process. By the time they'd be published, it would be too late. An event had passed, and I was feeling bad about this. And I thought, I don't want what's going on personally. What I built is much bigger than me. And it's in capable hands. If I find someone that can take the wheel for a bit while I navigate these personal things, what would that look like? And so I did, and I found a dear friend of mine who's been an advisor for me for years, who is also an extraordinary individual, and that's Bonnie Swirsky. She's like a sister to me. She's a business owner. She's an enthusiast. She's a race car driver.
Wow.
And she is someone who, I've got maybe a handful of very close people in my life who prioritize their personal integrity above all else. And she's one of them. My brother's another one. Almost to a fault. He's recklessly he has reckless integrity. But I handed it over for a while so that I could focus on things and give the things that I was focusing on 100% of my attention. Then I start getting calls out of the woodwork, and Bonnie was one of them, about what we knew, that the changes in Congress, that them cutting funding for public broadcasting and public news, we knew when that was announced that Congress basically all agreed to pass it. We knew that it would have a big impact on public news. We knew it wasn't going to affect us because we don't receive money from anyone. Any small amount that we receive from advertisers goes straight to cover our overhead costs. And we always come up short. We operate at a loss, and that's okay. But we knew it was going to change the media landscape. And so several discussions were had about this. I looked at my situation. I got a few new attorneys on board to help handle my personal things. And I said, now's a good time, because we want to build something that can not be lumped in with all of the public, because we already published something. I believe it was last week, a week or so ago, when it happened, talking about what happened, and the community response was not at all what I thought it was going to be. Looking at the comments from that story, and the story was just reporting the facts. Congress got together. Here's what happened. Here's what it means. Here's the local stations that might be affected. And I thought people would be outraged, and they weren't. They were, well, good. We shouldn't be using tax dollars to pay for this anyways. They're all corrupt anyways. And I thought, that's how bad it's gotten, because we don't even trust public news, and we have good reason not to. And not to say that all public news networks are reporting lies, but when you have money that you get from someone, especially from the government, it always comes with strings. Whether or not you even realize them, there are stories that might be suppressed. There are narratives that might be presented that aren't factual that you're expected to push. We don't have those rules. And it was important to me when we had these conversations that if I'm going to come back and be back as president full time, we are going to do a couple things differently, but not in a bad way. We're going to definitely double down on differentiating ourselves from the other networks. We just won while I've been away. And I've not really been away. I'm still doing news. I was still doing news stories, but while I was on my sabbatical from being president.
Good word.
Yeah. Things were still happening. Cleveland 13 came in third for best news network in Cleveland in the best of Cleveland with Cleveland Scene. I was voted second best reporter in Northeast Ohio. That still blows my mind because I was on there every day putting in nominations, trying to get Denise Zarrella and Nikki Brown nominated. And I was nominated and almost won. Natalie Herbeck came in number one, and good for her. And that was another thing. People were like, you were so close. And I said, are you kidding? I never thought anyone would say this is the best reporter. And I looked at that, and I looked at what Cleveland 13 achieved and what I achieved, and I thought, it's because we break the rules. It's because we create our new ones. It's because we throw irrelevant ones out the window. So that's something that we needed to double down on. That's something that we needed to look in the eye and say, anything that doesn't make sense is no longer a thing that we will do. And one big thing, and I'll announce it here because it's going to be happening very soon, is looking at the parts of the news that get a lot of attention but don't get a lot of engagement. And whether or not those things are even necessary. And the big one was the weather. The weather's important. We never cared about reporting it because all the other networks are reporting the weather, and they get their information from National Weather Service anyways. But it's the most viewed thing on most news networks, but the least engaged. And it's because it's boring. Let's be real. It's going to rain, it's going to snow, it's going to be sunny, whatever. We just need to know what it's going to be. We don't care. We just need to know. And then I thought about one of our affiliates, Gary Tollett, who owns WOBL and WDLW in Oberlin. And Denise Zarrella also reports the news on the airwaves with those stations. And this is what I mean, a network, and it all intertwines. And he has this traffic report that's just hilarious. It's absolutely hysterical. It has nothing to do with the traffic, but it's so funny. And I was thinking, you know what? We could do that with the weather. Why not? Why not? Why not make it so enjoyable that you look forward to the weather report? That it should be funny, that it should be goofy, that it should be accurate. And when it can't be accurate, when there's some type of sort of ambiguity or uncertainty with the weather, saying that. That's so important, saying that. Like, look, we're looking at the National Weather Service, and they're saying it's supposed to rain. But the Farmer's Almanac says it never rains on the second Tuesday of April, so you know, we're gonna summon the spirit of Dick Goddard and hope he can help us get through. Making it fun, making it enjoyable, because there's no reason for it not to be. Again, life is short. We should be smiling as much as humanly possible. And that's a way to do it. If there is a time and a place for sad things, and a very serious time for those things. If there's something that happened that's devastating, people should know about it. But if there's something that's happening that's not devastating, that's not scary, and it's not meant to be, make it enjoyable, because you're going to understand something more that you had a positive experience receiving.
Absolutely.
So I would much rather talk to someone I would much rather watch a news story where someone's in the kitchen and they're cooking something up, or somebody's learning how a garbage truck works and how it compacts the stuff, and getting hands on and seeing. And I would rather watch that story than watch someone sit down with the head of waste management and saying, listen, so how old are your trucks? Do they, are they supposed to be exchanged or replaced after so many years? No, I want to get on the truck. Take me through the day, a day in the life of a garbage man that's dealing with this, because now I'm getting more of a story. We're having a conversation on an interview. So you're going to tell me more, and I'm never going to weaponize it against you. And that's something that media tends to do. They take words out of context. They use sound bites that are taken out of context to fit the story around a narrative that they built before even knowing what the story was going to be. I'd never go into any story, any conversation, knowing what the story is going to be. I don't want to know. I want to know some things. Who am I going to talk to? What are we going to talk about? Where am I going? How do I get there? But I try, and sometimes I make a list of certain things I definitely want to make sure that I ask. But when I'm there, I have those notes, and half the time I don't even look at them, because those questions are asked naturally in the natural flow of what we're doing, and so much more. And then once it happens, I create a story based on what just happened,
Exactly.
and I put in the information that I got. And our stories get so much more engagement. We are syndicated on Newsbreak, and if you look at Newsbreak, if you look at the Cleveland 13 profile on Newsbreak compared to Fox 8, Channel 3, Channel 519, Cleveland.com, all of those, our engagement on Newsbreak is through the roof. It's absolutely phenomenal. And I think it's not only our stuff indexes faster than the other networks does. We have really good SEO, and this is part of having a really good team of passionate people together. They're not working to hit a deadline so they can get paid. They're working to make it as best as it can be, because they want to see their legacy grow because of what they built. And also because of the content itself, it's so much more engaging, and people are trusting it, because until you give, people will trust you. It's a psychology. People will trust you until you give them a reason not to. We will not give people a reason not to trust us, because if we report something, we bend over backwards to make sure that it's accurate and it's balanced. And that if we're talking about what's going on in the mayor's office, we're going to try to talk to the mayor and get his side. We're not just going to talk about what everyone's saying. We want to hear all sides, and we're not telling you what to think. We want you to know that we talked to all these people. Here's what they had to say. Form your own opinion.
Well,
That's the best news.
that
That's
is.
the best news.
So your purpose, your power, and your journey to authenticity is Cleveland 13 News.
Absolutely, 100%.
I am so excited to be a part of it. Um, and I'm starting to get to know some of the people who are on your board and who are affiliates like I am. And I'm going to be bringing them on this show as well, because I want I want people to understand that even though we all have the same basic passion, we are coming from so many different places.
Yeah.
And that includes those of you who are sitting out there saying, how can I be a part of it? And first of all, go to Cleveland 13 News, check it out, see the different stories. Um, Maybe you only like one portion of it, and that's fine, because there are certain TV stations that I watch and I only like, this much. And it's like, that's what I watch, and I switch to something else or I go away.
Is it the weather? No, just kidding.
But I welcome you all. And man, I'm so glad you're coming back on board full time. Um, you're going to be hearing more from me, because you and I did talk like, what else can I do for 13? And I'm going to find another niche, because I believe
Good,
in it.
good.
And
And I want anyone that's watching this to know that there is a process. It's not just anybody, but anybody can be a part of this in some capacity. People, you guys send us stories all the time, and a lot of the time we pursue them. So I mean, some of them don't. We can't guarantee that anything gets published, but we look into everything that's sent to us. And sometimes people have a passion and they're just doing it alone and don't think that they have uh, the ability to make it bigger. You do. You do, and it's never too late. And I tell people all the time, one of the things I don't like, and I don't have a problem with any of the other Cleveland networks. In fact, we're the only network that shares their stories. If we do a story and somebody else is covering it as well, we'll put links to their story at the bottom of our articles and say, other news on this subject can be found at Fox 8 and Channel 3. And the links are right there. We're the only news network that does that because it's not a competition to us. We're not looking for ratings or placement. It's about getting the information out there. And if that means you got to get that information from Fox 8, you get it from Fox 8.
Absolutely.
But we're not going to share a link to something that we know might be misleading or something. We're sharing balanced and truthful and honest and integrity-based content. So I think this is important because anybody can be a part of this. And that could be as an affiliate. It can be as just a guest contributor. Maybe you are someone who wrote something up, or you have a story in mind, or you just have a tip and you see something going on and you have the video from it. We want people to see what you saw. If you thought it was important enough for you to take your time to think about it, you're not alone.
Absolutely.
And that's a really important distinction. If you have a question, you should, and I don't like the idea that anyone would have any questions about most things after watching a Cleveland 13 news story. Because if you have a question about something, then chances are many other people have the same question. And that's why the approach that we have, the very hands-on approach that we are going through the process like a viewer, because that's how we're going to get the answers to all of the questions that we want. And we encourage people, if you see us out filming, even if it's me, especially if it's me, um, wait until the cameras are off, but come over and say hi. We can do selfies and we'll tag you on Cleveland 13. This is a community effort. It's not just about the reporters. The reporters should not be on pedestals. We get to have the coolest job in the world. If we're good at it, we get to go places and try things before other people do, because we need to show you what it's like. That's the coolest job in the world. I'm not going to sit here and try and downplay that like, oh yeah, it's a job. It's not. If you're doing this, if you're passionate about it, just like anything, if you're passionate about what you do, you never have to work a day in your life.
That's right.
And almost anything someone could be passionate about in media, there's a place for that at Cleveland 13.
I love it. Well, we are going to conclude this today, but it doesn't mean that you aren't going to be back on, because I know as you start helping us develop more things at Cleveland 13, there's going to be more announcements, more things to talk about. And,
Always.
I just encourage people, start communicating. And communication doesn't mean yelling at each other. It means talking and listening to each other. That's why I do this podcast. Matt, you're wonderful. Have a
You're
beautiful
wonderful.
day. Well, thank you. You've made my day. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
All right. We'll talk soon.